Good day, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in again today. Regular listeners and viewers will know that I said keep your eyes open for what's coming up at the NATO meetings, and President Trump has not let anybody down in terms of expectations for fireworks there. Watch out. I want to talk about today about fireworks on the women's basketball court and maybe into professional golf. And hey, check out the latest tourism trend. I want to talk about that. How about $4,000 or $5,000 for 3 nights at a fancy hotel while you get lymphatic drainage? Yes, it's happening right here. Stay tuned. And so, as I was discussing with President Trump going to NATO, he completely unleashed again on NATO and really targeted Spain, the country of Spain, saying that he wants to just quit all trade with them. He wants to shut them off entirely. He's totally disgusted with them. And he's, of course, had problems with them since they do not seem to be stepping up with the EU commitment. Remember, with the NATO commitment. Remember, President Trump forcing all nations, in NATO especially, to improve and step up and spend more on their own defense so that it doesn't have to be the US spending billions of dollars supporting and strengthening Europe. Some countries, most actually have responded to that. Spain has always pushed back. He's especially infuriated with Spain because Spain has opposed the attacks on Iran. As a matter of fact, Spain even restricted the use of some of its traditional air base and naval bases, which have been used for decades and shared with the U.S., so that the U.S. has what's called a launching pad, or a place where their own ships can refuel and planes can refuel. A couple of those places in southern Spain have been cut off to the U.S. So U.S. not happy with Spain, not happy with their Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, and also not happy with how Pedro Sanchez, the Prime Minister of Spain, continues to condemn Israel. So we're going to see what happens there. The air bases and the naval base are very key to ongoing activity and the ability of the U.S. to move their major aircraft carriers, and ships through there. We'll see what happens. While he was giving the word to the NATO meeting, at the very same time, he also obviously was giving word to his own military, because there were about 80 targets last night in Iran that got hit by the U.S. because Iran continues to hit and target ships that are moving through the Strait of Hormuz. So that has cranked things up. Interesting that Prime Minister Carney from Canada actually has given words of support to the U.S. For their these attacks on Iran, since Iran has been taking extreme measures in attacking innocent nations, innocent people, and continuing to support their own terrorist activities in places like Lebanon. So heating up there, folks. It sends a message, because I can tell you from my own dealings in terms of international security, international trade meetings, Moscow and Beijing, North Korea, they're all watching very carefully to see if, in fact, the U.S. will back its threats. If the U.S. says it's going to hit a particular country, are they going to back those threats? And by the U.S. continuing to hit Iran, they're sending that broader message to Moscow, Beijing, North Korea, these other countries, saying you better back off. Very important messaging that's going on there. The other thing that's really taking up conversation here in modern day warfare, the ability to quickly produce things like missiles, things like anti-missile activity, aircraft. These are the things that are going to be the determining, and are continuing to be the determining factor in whether a country can win a war or sustain a war. How quickly can you keep reproducing when your country is firing off thousands and thousands of its supply of missiles? Do you hit a point where you could run out? Is the U.S. going to run out of missiles and therefore be vulnerable to a place like China? There's a book out right now that's being touted and getting a lot of attention, written by an author but Robert McGinnis. He's a retired U.S. Army officer, and the book is called The New AI Cold War. If you remember, the Cold War was the name given to the tensions between principally the United States and the Soviet Union, which was a bloc of communist countries. And that Cold War, of course, had people on their edge all the time about wondering if nuclear war was going to break out. The US eventually won the Cold War because of their ability to continue to fund things like military capabilities. And the Soviet Union, in trying to keep up to that funding, was not able to. The Soviet Union, as we know, eventually breaking apart, that huge communist bloc after 70 years. And this is now, there's a comparison, the new AI Cold War, who can win it? And very clear, the comparisons here in terms of the threat. What can happen if one nation, or let's say a group of nations, let's say if the Soviet Union had become technically superior, technologically superior. It actually goes back centuries, if not thousands of years, if we look at how the Roman Empire, which was seen at the time and through history as one of the strongest and most successful empires to ever exist, the way they would conquer was they developed, first of all, superior armies and superior weaponry, everything from armor to shields to machines that could catapult huge boulders into walls. They developed warfare and technology, and using steel and brass and iron like no nations had before. They developed chariots that were better and stronger and faster. And so what they would do is they would go to, they would attack a country. They would go in, they would take out maybe just one or two of its major cities, and then they would say to the people in that country, now we're going to leave some of our soldiers, some of our officials here. We're going to allow you as a country to continue to exist. You can go about your business, but you need to send us tribute. You need to send us taxes. You need to send us a certain amount of, corn and oil and crops and even women and other commodities. You keep sending that stuff to Rome, we will leave you alone. We won't attack you, but if you try to defy us with our superior military capability, we will come in and crush you again. And that's basically, that was their model. Conquer, take out a couple major cities, kill a lot of the key people, and then say, go ahead, you can have your country, but our administrators here, our ambassadors here will be watching you, and you just keep sending us that tribute. And so there's some comparisons made that if a country in these days could have developed the capability to knock out the missile capability of a certain country, to knock out a country's nuclear capability, and then to go in, and here's a bit of fantasy, but it's being talked about more and more, where let's say you had a country like China, developed capability that could knock down any attack from the US, and technological ability, electromagnetic ability that could make US missile sites inoperable. Then all they would have to do is come in and maybe nuke a city like San Francisco or some other city and show how strong they are. And then they would just say to the US or to any other country, there, now we took out one of your cities. We showed you what we can do. Don't mess around with us, and we'll let you live in peace, but you need to send us tribute every year. You need to send us a certain amount of minerals. You need to send us a certain amount of money. You need to send a certain amount of crops, whatever it might be. This is not far-fetched fantasy. This is how the human mind, unfortunately, works. And this is why it is so important for a country to stay ahead in the AI war, so that they cannot be dominated by artificial intelligence and therefore technological capabilities, and wind up having to pay tribute to the country that does get ahead. The countries that will lead, and the country that can have that kind of strength, is the one who's got the strongest economy. And the US, especially seen through the years of the Soviet Union, had a much stronger economy. Why? Because it was freedom of investment, freedom of enterprise. It was based on people being able to raise capital and be inventive and to compete. And it was those strengths of a free enterprise economy that leads to innovation, that leads to not just innovation, of course, in weaponry, but in healthcare, in terms of building and infrastructure and on it goes, into all the things that give us the comforts in life, everything from air conditioning to clean drinking water. So the strongest economy is the one that potentially is going to also have the strongest medical capabilities. That's the battle that's going on right now, folks. We'll see if the so-called West, which is Canada is part of, will continue to have strong economies, or are we going to continue to collapse into systems which are largely socialistic, which are largely against innovation and against people being able to enjoy the rewards of their own labor? Or the more socialistic an economy becomes, the less capable it is to really produce the types of not just military but other goods and services that result in a higher standard of living. Let's watch as these competing political parties, whether it's in Canada or the US, get that message out there or not. Well, watching what's happening, not just in the economies, but if you have heard of Caitlin Clark, if you followed the WNBA, the Women's National Basketball Association, Caitlin Clark, of course, is the superstar in that league. She was a superstar coming up through the college leagues. She's probably the one single reason that people, the greatest reason that people actually tune into the WNBA. Nothing wrong with the WNBA, nothing wrong with its players, but people instinctively know when you're wanting to watch sports, you want to watch the best. You want to watch the highest level. And there's some great WNBA women's athletes for sure, but people kind of know instinctively and in the back of their own minds that, for instance, in the United States, it's well known that a top high school boys basketball team would easily be a contender in the women's NBA. And it's nothing against the women's ability. It's just you're talking about those physical differences between men and women. It would be overpowering. Anyway, a lot of fans being attracted, new fans being attracted to the WNBA because it's exciting to watch. And Caitlin Clark, though, has created, or there's been a lot of controversy around her because she is white and yet she's the dominant player. There's accusations that there's the amount of time she gets fouled in a game, the amount of time she gets aggressively hit and thrown down and punched is because of for racist reasons, that it's the black women doing this because she's white. I'm not so sure about that. Anytime you have in any league, whether it's hockey or football, we know, for instance, in hockey, if you have the star player on your team, that person is going to get hit more by the opposing players. That player is going to be watched more and watched more by the referee. So I'm not sure it's a racist thing. When you're the best, you pay the price. You pay a punishing price physically. That's what's happening. All of that to say, if you've heard of Annika Sorenstam, she is seen as the top women's golf player in the world, head of the women's PGA. And she's competing right now in one of the top tournaments, the American Century Tourism Tournament. And she was interviewed, and she was talking about what a tremendous golfer Caitlin Clark is, and raising the speculation, would Caitlin Clark also move into golf, professional women's golf? If she did, there is no question she would draw millions of viewers, just as she has to the WNBA. Let's face it, the WNBA gets the viewers and the attendance every time she attends at a game somewhere. Attendance goes way up, the viewership goes up. She could be doing here. Annika Sorenstam is saying she could be actually doing the same thing to golf as she is to basketball. We'll see where all that is going to go, but keep an eye on it. No telling where that might wind up. Well, in terms of trends that develop in other areas and jurisdictions that will affect, whenever you see a trend developing, if it's successful, it can affect political processes in other areas. Florida, there's a tax vote coming up which will radically reduce the amount of taxes that local governments can raise. And there is no secret that across Canada, across the US, local governments, city governments, municipal government costs continue to go up. Sometimes that can be substantiated by the fact that you have more growth. But what's happening is, with this tax proposal, if it passes, it's being promoted there by the governor, Ron DeSantis. If that passes, it will reduce the amount of money that local municipalities can force out of taxpayers. And it will force municipalities to look at what they spend their money on. Now, I can tell you from experience at the provincial government level as a former minister of finance, anytime you say to any level of government, and this is especially true of municipalities, if you say you're going to reduce the amount of money that they can take from taxpayers, they will start reducing their spending for sure. But it's what we saw was is what you call the swimming pool response. The very thing that most municipalities will do is they'll say, okay, you're going to give us less money, and then they'll start to cut the things that hurt the most and get people upset the most. For instance, closing swimming pools. So we call it the swimming pool attack. And of course, especially in the summertime, you'll get reaction from parents if swimming pools get closed, and then the mayor and the councillor say, well, there's nothing we can do because the senior government, whether it's provincial or federal or state, is hurting us, and that makes citizens mad. And then they say, the theory is they say back then to the provincial or state legislators, you got to give more money to the cities. What needs to happen is for cities to seriously look at their budgets. What things are they spending millions and millions on that have nothing to do, let's say, with infrastructure or the provision of clean water, and get rid of those things. It's amazing the extra spending that many cities get into that have nothing at all to do with infrastructure and with keeping a city going. So let's watch for that. The reason we talk about it, why Florida, these things have a way of catching on quickly, and you are going to see, my prediction here, you are going to see increased initiatives here from ratepayers, from taxpayers in cities. And I say to mayors and city councilors, I've said it before, with all of the great capability we have with AI, do you need to be hiring more and more public servants? I'm not saying that cities need to go on a firing binge and lay people off in big numbers. You don't have to do that at all. Just allow attrition to take place. That's meaning that as people retire, don't necessarily assume they all have to be replaced, because people become more capability with the increased advances that we have in AI. So you don't have to slash and fire everybody at City Hall. Just let attrition take its place. Under the mayorship of Gregor Robertson, the former mayor of Vancouver, we saw a great example of huge increase in the number of people being hired by the city. And that's a huge expense. Every time a city hires another person, that is a 50-year commitment on the back of the taxpayers, because obviously when you hire someone, they're going to be full-time, they're a good employee, they're going to stay for 25 or so years, they'll probably be alive for 25 or so years after that, so they'll have their pension, which is their rightful due. So it's just important for a city to keep in mind every time you make a new hire, that is a 50-year commitment, another 50-year commitment on the back of taxpayers. Let's see if this wave of pressure on cities to only be spending money on things that matter, let's see if that continues and see if this wave continues. Well, you want to talk about a wave that's continuing as more and more people are looking for all different types of tourism adventures. There's, of course, you would know if you're involved in watching anything to do with the so-called health trends, anti-inflation, anti-inflammation, sorry, yeah, anti-inflation is good. Anti-inflammation is huge. Inflammation, as doctors tell us, can be very destructive to the body, but inflammation, different types of inflammation, is also necessary to the body to repair and to fix itself depending on what's attacking the body. But anything to do, you say the word anti-inflammation, whether it's a food product, which is omega-3, whether it's a certain drug, or whether it's a treatment, you're going to get big attention today. Anti-inflammation, so much so there's a story in the Wall Street Journal today about these 3-day retreats, $4,000, $5,000, as people are planning these tourism retreats to exotic areas, and they go on 3 days of anti-inflammation eating and activity. And the big thing is lymphatic drainage. We all have lymph glands, which are needed, of course, to maintain our health. And as the theory goes, and there's some question about it, your lymph glands need to be drained regularly, and this comes about by vigorous, if not at times bruising, massage areas, where there can be areas you don't usually massage, like maybe under the arms, areas that are sensitive. People report they can come out black and blue after these, depending on the intensity. But to give you an idea of the amount of interest, it was noted in a report that there's right now out there on TikTok, there's about 340,000 different videos, short videos, some as short as 30 seconds to 60 seconds, that talk about and demonstrate how you can do lymphatic drainage. Folks, these things are huge. And of course, accompanying that, you're going to see more and more, I believe, focus on even buying, for instance, anything to do with helping you to do cold plunges. Nothing wrong with a cold plunge. I'm just saying it's becoming epidemic. Their use, red light therapy, hyperbaric oxygen chambers that athletes sometimes use. Watch for an increase in all of these areas. But interesting, as doctors are being interviewed in this interview, they said, well, yeah, sure, all these things, they're fine, but they do tend to get over exaggerated. People get caught up spending huge amounts of money. And many doctors are saying basic things like getting enough sleep at night, uh, your social network being supportive, and having just sort of peace in your own heart and mind about life in general. Along with that, go ahead and get the new treatment called gua sha. This is something you can buy, and you take this and you scrape your skin, and apparently you don't scrape it off, you don't make yourself bleed, but skin scraping leads to all kind of stimulation in your body and helps anti-inflammation. So there it is, folks. Watch for that trend continuing to grow. I just did an article, an interview, extensive interview with Canada's one of Canada's major newspapers, the Globe and Mail, and we're talking about the problems relative to the federal government and alienation from countries like, or sorry, provinces. There's a Freudian slip. Provinces like Alberta. And they're asking what are some ways the federal government, even the prime minister, could endear himself to a province like Alberta. Well, certainly he's taking what might be steps in the right direction by recognizing the importance of pipelines to bring much needed refined oil and gas products to across the country and to other parts of the world. But also, I said a very simple step would be to acknowledge Alberta's legislation, which has been in place for quite a number of years, in which Albertans in a municipal election, they also get the chance to vote for who they would like to see as their own senator. Because in Canada, senators are appointed, they're not elected. That shocks a lot of people around the world. They're appointed by the prime minister of the day. They're usually partisan appointments, quite understandably. And so what Alberta did to keep in line with the Constitution and not have to require constitutional change, they just developed a way in which Albertans would select from names that would people who would run for the position of Senate. And then once that election is over, those names, the 2 or 3 or 4 people who won the Senate choice elections, those names would be given to the prime minister, and the prime minister would be asked, when it comes time to appoint senators from Alberta, please pick from this list that Albertans have chosen. So that doesn't require any constitutional change. It's still up to the prime minister to do it or not. There have been prime ministers in the past, like Prime Minister Mulroney, Prime Minister Harper, who acknowledged that and did that, and it found great favor with the people of Alberta. A simple move by Prime Minister Carney is what I was suggesting. And lo and behold, yesterday he comes out with Senate appointments, none for Alberta, unfortunately, but he picked a conservative member of parliament from Quebec. His name is Richard Martel. I know Richard. He's actually a good guy, a solid guy. And so he will be resigning from the opposition ranks of members of parliament from the Conservative Party, and he will be going to the Senate. That means there'll be a by-election. So a little bit of a stroke of political strategy there on the part of the Prime Minister. He's showing favor to Quebec. He's giving them one of their own to go into the Senate. He's reducing the number of MPs in the Conservative caucus in the House of Commons. It will force a by-election, which I guess he would hope that he wins. So amazing political strategy there, and that this is going to put even more pressure now in terms of what I was saying to the Globe and Mail. Now, how about Prime Minister Carney appoint someone when an opportunity comes up in Alberta that's been elected by Albertans. In the Senate, there's only of over 100. There's usually, in terms of people who have resigned or vacant seats, slightly over 100 senators. In the House of Commons, only 11 of them are conservative appointments. The others are all what they call independent. They, in fact, are not really independent. They've all been appointed by the Prime Minister, many appointed by Prime Minister Trudeau. And let's face it, these are going to be people who either were Liberals before, or certainly new appointments being liberal-minded in their views. So another actually smart bit of political strategy that was put in place. It looks like it's just the Conservatives that are partisan, all the rest are independent. Of course, we know that's not a fact. Excuse me. There's something going on in Brazil. You're saying, well, what are you talking about Brazil? Because international cases like this tend to have international influence. And in Brazil, there's an interesting story about two parents that are facing prison because they've been homeschooling their two girls. Their girls are 11 and 15 years old, homeschooling them since COVID was sending people away from school. And this has gone all the way to the High Court in Brazil. And the High Court there is saying they will send the parents to jail. And because in the homeschooling program, they're not teaching enough about gender and sex. And because of that, the courts have said this means the girls are intellectually deprived. There have been, in this particular case, the parents and their lawyers have produced over 3,000 pages of evidence, including testing on the girls, showing that they are advanced over the average girls in the public system in Brazil in every category, doing very well. But the courts have ruled, since they're not using the woke gender and sex education program, they're not going to be accepted. The parents could, in fact, wind up in jail. And the parents, Odato and Lida Denardi, are trying to appeal this and finding some help. And they're also, in the court ruling, very interesting, the court frowning on the fact that the girls are exposed to and enjoy so-called religious music and not what's called in Brazil trap or rap music. So even going after the family and the parents for not exposing the girls to the right type of music. Folks, the reason I raise this is because cases like this tend to have an international influences on countries nearby and around the world. Let's be thinking about these parents and things like parental rights. If you are a person of faith, you might want to keep those parents in your prayers. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Catch you tomorrow.